Welcome back to Jersey Matters. It's the County Prosecutor Show. Welcome, Prosecutor Chris Gramicconi of Monmouth County. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much. And I kind of want to do the same thing that we just did, and I want to talk about what's in the news today with your office, but also talk a little bit about sexual harassment and how and when it becomes criminal. But I do want to start off by talking about the fact that you've found on your streets something dangerous, and that is a synthetic drug that can be deadly that's posing as another drug.
That's right. That's probably the scariest thing I've seen since I've been prosecutor in the last 5 or so years. And everybody knows about the efforts we've made with trying to fight the heroin epidemic that's going on out there. What we've seen lately is the synthetic or analog substitute for heroin called fentanyl starting to be in samples that are being dealt by drug dealers across the county. And even the smallest substance of this, enough to fit on the tip of a pen, can kill you if it's ingested. And that's a pretty scary thing for us in law enforcement.
Well, tell me what you're seeing, like for people that may want to buy, is oxycodone?
Yeah, well, for example, if people want to buy oxycodone, the pills, they look as if it's a lawfully prescribed oxycodone pill. It's blue, it's got the A215 marking on it. But we've seized substances where it's fake. It's actually synthetic fentanyl that people are trying to present as if it's a legitimate, lawfully prescribed drug.
They're obviously buying this illegally.
They are, yeah. These are people that are trying to buy these pills on the street. Obviously not anyone in the medical profession.
So somebody represents this as getting it from somebody's medicine cabinet or getting it from a pharmacy, and they believe it's safe because it's been going through the FDA, and it's not.
That's right, and we've also seen samples of heroin, which in and of itself is terrible, but a user or an addict that uses heroin is used to using so many bags a day, but if it has fentanyl in it, even the smallest amount, if it's injected in there by the dealer, it can kill you instantly. I mean, this is what we're seeing, and we're not alone here. We're seeing this across the state and across the region, and it's a real concern.
And the problem you have is your outreach on that. So you're reaching out to addicts who are desperate to get this product to feed their addiction and telling them, no, don't take that one.
Right, and that's why I'm so glad to be here with you. The messaging is all the more important, is making sure that even people who unfortunately are users of heroin or opiates, you're playing Russian roulette. If you go and you buy a sample on the street, a dealer doesn't care. That drug dealer, all they want to do is drive their overhead costs down. Fentanyl is pennies on the dollar compared to the plant-derived biologic opium that comes from where opiates come from. So they're going to take the easiest financial way out and put it in these substances. And by the way, all along, they're creating more addicts because the product is so rich and pure, it causes people to want to come back. The risk is if you put too much fentanyl in there, carfentanil, some of these really severe substances, it'll kill you instantly.
Can they turn the person in, like if, let's say there's an addict on the street and they're buying this and they suspect it of being fake, can they turn that person in, can they turn that over to you without being prosecuted?
The dealer?
No, none of the can the person who maybe purchased it be able to come to you and say, I just purchased this in the street?
They can. We would have to negotiate something like that, but if they knew that there was a fentanyl in there, obviously I would want to get to the source of supply, so we would try to run an investigation, which helps us arrest them.
It makes it difficult to investigate if they can't, if they're not going to come forward. That's what I was saying.
It does, because there's concern that they're going to get arrested. So what we often see is, unfortunately, somebody dies who's an addict, and then when we do the toxicology report at the medical examiner's office, we'll find that they ingested some kind of fentanyl, unknowing, of course. People typically don't want to ingest a substance that could kill them, and then we try to build a strict liability homicide case against whoever that dealer was, but oftentimes, especially when the victim is deceased, it's hard to identify who that is. So this is some of the challenges in law enforcement, but I will tell you, we're working hard on it. We want to catch those people and prosecute them for strict liability homicide who commit these crimes, these dealers.
Let's move on to the topic of the day, if
yes,
we
sir.
can, and that is sexual harassment that's coming across the country. Now, as you read these cases, and there's a long litany of cases now from Harvey Weinstein, and I guess the latest is Matt Lauer and others. Some of these are criminal, aren't they?
They are. It depends on the circumstances in every single situation. Because sexual harassment, you can create a hostile or offensive work environment. If there's an unwanted or a non-consensual touching of some sort, then it arguably could become a crime. So if somebody is touched without consent, that's where it could be a battery, an assault or otherwise. But if it's just conduct or behavior, could be words, actions, but not necessarily a physical touching, that might not rise to the level of a crime. Everything is circumstance driven. That said, though, that doesn't preclude I'm sure most businesses and certainly government agencies all have internal regulations and rules where you can't commit conduct like that. It's zero tolerance for all the agencies in Monmouth County, for every agency I've ever worked for, Department of Navy, Department of Justice. So
it's fascinating that you say zero tolerance, because there is a problem now in that accusers are almost immediately believed. And the person that's accused many times has to leave because of an accusation. You're a prosecutor, you deal in evidence, you deal in corroboration. That doesn't have to exist with an accusation in the workforce these days. Well, does that concern you?
Well, look, it does to a certain extent. When somebody is going to be brought up on administrative disciplinary charges, something that's completely separate and apart from criminal charges, they have certain procedural rights that are outlined, of course, in my office by the County of Monmouth. So they do have procedural rights and remedies that can be followed. I couldn't speak to private industry businesses like you mentioned, NBC News or otherwise, but it's not necessarily just a situation where somebody makes a report and that person is out the door. Of course, there's some kind of process they're entitled to. But that said, it isn't the same as a criminal process where you have to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt, or you have to have corroborated and quantified evidence. It's a different standard of proof because it doesn't involve taking your rights and liberties away. It just involves you having employment.
It's bothersome to me, some of the stories that I've been reading. I mean, it's bothersome to me for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons it is I read what's happened, and I say to myself, that's a crime. That's not just sexual harassment, that's a crime. Do you ever get called into a workplace to prosecute a case in a workplace like this?
Not to my knowledge, we haven't. And what you're talking about is a lot of these reports, unfortunately, the victims are reporting it beyond what's called a statute of limitations. In some crimes, not all of them, in some crimes, there's generally a 5-year statute of limitations. So if you don't report it within 5 years, let's say an unwanted touching, then you couldn't prosecute somebody for that. But that said, if it's a sex assault or a rape, there's a lot of laws that have changed where the statute of limitations doesn't run.
Well, some of these are sexual assault.
That's right.
I mean, some of them are, and a sexual assault would be just the unwanted touching of somebody in an intimate area, right? Is that the definition?
It depends. It depends on the type of crime that's being committed. Obviously, if it's rape in New Jersey and here, the statute of limitations wouldn't run until somebody came out to report it. It used to be 10, 15 years ago that you'd be boxed in by a certain statute of limitations. Well, that's changed, and not just because of what's going on here. This has been the law of the state for a number of years now. But if it's a touching, let's say over the clothes, or like what you've read about, right, the chest area or the backside area, that would be more akin to an assault, even though it might have occurred in a sexual harassment environment. And that assault would have to be reported by the victim within 5 years.
So the statute of limitations is longer when there's penetration, is what you're saying?
Yes, it's fair to say that. And every circumstance is different. But in New Jersey, for example, if somebody is, let's say they're raped, then the statute of limitations wouldn't run until they report it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming in. Prosecutor Chris Gramicconi of Monmouth County. Jersey Matters continues right after this.
When Jersey Matters continues, ice fishing in New Jersey. Yes, it does happen, and we have proof next.